Hi and welcome to techsith tutorials. Today we're going to learn about a very important topic um, called CSS selectors. So let's look at a quick introduction to why do we need CSS selector. Um, let's say you have a paragraph, a simple paragraph with some simple content, blah, in it, and so if you look at to render this paragraph on the web page, it looks like this. But let's say if I wanted to add a background color to this paragraph, to red, the easiest way to do it is by adding inline styling, which means you would add an attribute style equal to, and then in a double quotes, you would say background dash color colon red. That would make the background color to be red. So let's say if you want to move that inline style to a separate CSS file, first you remove that inline style from it. So your HTML document looks like this. I mean, I removed all the other stuff, just the what goes in the body. And what you do, you write a separate CSS file. In this CSS file, you would write following. So you write P, and you have an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket, and in between, you will write the style background dash color colon red and semicolon, just exactly like you would write in the style, but the curly bracket are extra here. And if you notice, instead of writing style, what I'm doing is I'm referring the paragraph, the sign P here, so that my HTML would understand which area of the HTML I'm trying to apply this style to. And obviously your HTML will render as this. Now if you look at the full HTML file, it would look like this. So on the top, let's say you have your index HTML file, and you have your header, where actually you would write your reference to your CSS file, mystyle.css. And the body, you have the paragraph, and in the mystyle.css, you would write your style for the paragraph. So P here is the CSS selector. So let's do some coding here. First of all, if you go to this URL, jsfiddle.net, again a quick intro to JSFiddle. JSFiddle is a code playground. It allows you to actually write your test your code very easily. So you have 4 boxes here. This box right here, you would write your HTML. Here you write your CSS. Here you write your JavaScript, and you would see the result here. So let's really write. And again, you don't have to write the whole body, HTML tags, header tags, or anything like that. It automatically understands. It links them together. So let's, without ado, let's write the code. So I'm going to first write a paragraph. And I'm going to close this tag. Okay. And I'm going to play this. As you can see, the result, when I click run after writing this, the result shows up here. Okay. Now, I can use this P to change the background color equal to red. As you can see, it's changing the background color to red. Now let's say if this tag, let's say I'm going to write another tag. called div. And I'm just going to write this is div tag. Okay, that's the content. I'm going to close this tag. I'm going to run it. As you can see, the content is showing up here. Now, again, the selector would be just the tag name. So for tag name, the selector is easy, just a tag name, div. Here I'm going to say font color equal to 30 pixel. And I'm just going to run it. Oh, sorry, not the font color, font size. My bad. Font size. And as you can see, now the funny thing is, if I just copy and paste and just run it, so what this really means is that apply this style to all the div tags. Any tag that is div, it will apply font size to 30 pixels. And the same thing with the paragraph. If I copy this, if I make more paragraphs here, if I run this, as you can see, it applying this style to every single paragraph tag. If I change, so all I have to change, let's say if I want to change from red to blue, all I have to do this and bingo, it changes. So that's what the selector does. Here. So in conclusion, tag name selectors are tag name themselves. You just write the curly bracket after the tag name. But remember, it applies to all the tag name in the HTML document. So if you have, let's say, 50 paragraphs, and if you use the paragraph selector to style them, it will apply to all the 50 paragraphs. For example, if you want to apply some paragraph different styles and the rest different style, then you have to use other selector in combination to do that. So the next selectors are very important, and they are attribute selector. So you can add attribute to your elements and use the combination of attribute and tag names to style differently. So quick introduction to attributes. Attributes are added into your opening tag using key and value pair. So here I have created my own attribute called isParagraph, and the value of it is yes. And you write yes with double quotes. And it always goes in an opening tag, never in a closing tag. There are some selectors that are predefined in HTML, and it has a specific meaning. So when you say ID, HTML know what you mean. If you say class, it has a specific meaning. You already know the style attribute, right? When you say style, it takes the value as a style and applies it to element. So style has a specific meaning. And href, which is hyperlink. So in this slide, you have the first line is the paragraph selector, so selector by tag name. And then the second line, I have added an attribute called isParagraph equal to yes. And on the right side, I have the attribute selector. So what it's doing, it's adding square brackets around it. And that's how you access your attributes in CSS. So let's go back to the JS fiddle here, and we're going to understand how we can write this. So let's start by writing a paragraph. Now I'm going to write here an attribute is paragraph equal to yes. And in CSS here, all I have to do is put curly square brackets around is paragraph, and between the curly brackets I'm gonna write style. So let's say background color is red, and I'm just gonna run this, and you can see it's using the selector to color the background color black. Now the second part is, let's say how do we use the value itself also in this equation? So for example, if I create another paragraph down here, and I'm going to say paragraph to no, and I'm going to change the tag name to div. So the second line is not a paragraph, so that's why I am putting the attribute is paragraph to no. And so when I do this, it also colors it red. Why? Because the selector, I'm not using the specific value. I'm just saying that anytime you find an attribute is paragraph, change the background color to red, and that's what it's doing. But I want to add value in the equation, so all I have to simply do is I have to type the value here. So now this time in the selector itself I put the value, say only color the paragraph with value yes, with the is paragraph value equal to yes. So that's what it's doing. So far we looked at linear selectors for attributes. So for example, if you can select by attribute name, you can select by attribute name and value. But let's say you want to do something a little bit out there, like you want to select all the attribute values containing word, specific word. Let's say in this case, let's say word yes. This is how you write it. So in a square bracket, you would say is paragraph tilde equal to yes, and closing square bracket. So what we're going to do, we're going to try that. So first of all, I'm going to copy this paragraph and make 4 copies here. And the attribute value I'm going to change for each attribute. For the first one, I'm going to say yes space for sure. For the second one, I'm going to say for yes, just yes. And then the third one, I'm going to say OMG, yes. The last one is going to be yes, maybe. So if the first 3, you have a, first one you have a space between yes and for sure. So yes, it's an individual word here. But in the last one, it's actually yes is part of a word. It's not an individual word. So if you run this, okay, and then you just put the tilde in front of the yes, and then as you can see, the first 3 lines are the background is red, and the last one it did not, because yes is not a word inside the attribute value. So next 2 attribute selectors are also nonlinear in nature. The first one is attribute value ends with a particular text. In this case, it's yes. So if you look at this example, sir, yes ends with yes. Dear, yes is also ending with yes. So it will select both of them. And then the second selector is where the attribute value starts with yes. So the way you write it is attribute, and then you put that vertical line equal to yes. So in this example, both attribute values starts with yes. Yes sir and yes dear. I'm not going to give you an example. This is a simple one, so I'm not going to give you an example. You can try it yourself. So let's move on to some more important attributes like ID and class. So again, ID and class are predefined attributes in HTML, which means there's a specific meaning to it. And let's just get started by giving an example. So here I have ID attribute, a paragraph with ID attribute value my ID, and I have some text content blah. If I run it, the result shows as blah here as a paragraph. Nothing surprising about this. Now let's as an attribute, you can style it as we learned in the previous chapter. We can say ID equal to my ID, and then we can style it, background color is red. And when you run this, it works fine. But in HTML, since ID has predefined job, it was given a special selector, and that is a pound sign. So you can do this exactly the same here. I'm gonna cut this from here, and then I'm just gonna paste it here. This does exactly the same job as this would. So if I run this, I have to put my ID here. If I run this, it does the same thing. So it's much easier just to this. You have to use a pound sign in front of the attribute ID value, and then use the style in between the curly bracket. So from starting now, we're now going to use this attribute, the typical attribute selector. We're just going to use the ID selector, which is the pound sign. Let's look at another selector, class selector. So I have another paragraph, and I'm going to add a class attribute here called my class. And I'm going to call, instead of blah, I'm just going to call it class here, so we can see which one is rendering with how. And this one I'm going to call it ID. And the class selector is dot. So you just put simply dot in front of the class value, which is my class in this case. And this one I'm going to say background color blue. And let's run this. So now I have two lines. The first one is ID, and the second one is for a class. Again, you cannot see the text very well because the background is also very dark. You know, a red is a dark color, and a blue is even darker. So we can actually do something here where we can say, you know what, actually, we can add let's say color white. I'm gonna here also I'm gonna add color white. And then I'm gonna run it. So now the color of both element is white. So color basically means font color. Now, if you look at currently there are 4 lines. The background color red, color white, background color blue. I think that's a lot of lines. There's a duplication of color white here. So how do you reduce this duplication? So again, ID is a predefined attribute in HTML, and its definition is pretty much ID is a unique selector. Means once you use, it's like your social security number, or when you purchase a product, you get a unique product ID, which identifies that particular product in the class of that product, right? So you cannot give another ID, same ID number to another product. So in this case, ID works the same thing. Once you give ID to an element, you cannot reuse that. So what we're going to do is, in this 2 paragraph, we're going to add both paragraph and ID here. So let's do this. I'm going to copy and paste here. And I'm going to just say, I'm just going to say 1 and 2. And I'm going to say 1, 2 here. Okay, so I have 2 IDs, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the background color of 1 blue, and I'm going to put 2 it will do exactly the same thing. Okay, so here I have 2 IDs, and the first one I have background color red and color white, and I have a second ID where I have background color blue and color white. Now I'm gonna use a class in both of them. Call class equal to white. And I'm going to add that class to both, because you can have a multiple attribute for a given element. So that's what I'm doing here. And I'm going to remove the color white here from each element. Instead, I'm going to add a class selector called white, and I'm going to put the white inside. So instead of 4 lines, now I have actually 3 lines here. And it would do exactly the same thing. Actually, I have some issue here. Oh, I haven't finished it. So it does exactly the same thing. The good thing about it is let's say I want to change this white color to, let's say, yellow. I have to change it once. And it changes to yellow. Compared to the previous example where, you know, I had given color white into both elements. Means if you have, let's say, 50 elements, you have to change the color to all 50 elements. But if you define a class called white and then add that class into every single element, you can easily change the color for all the elements to yellow when you want to. Obviously, then you would not give it the name of the class white. You would give something else, obviously. So don't give a particular color as the class name. Otherwise, it's conflicting, you know, class white with yellow color. So, anyways, but that's in a nutshell. So ID is used one, so that's why I'm using it one, and then class I can use it multiple times. And if I want to add another class, for example, I can add another class called let's do something else very interesting. Let's say if I add a few more elements here. So this will give you kind of like a practice of how to So then it will give you kind of understanding of when to use class and when to use ID and how to use a combination of classes and IDs and all that stuff, right? So let's say I have four elements, and I can use a background color. So let's say I can use 2 more. Well, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna have to squeeze it here so you guys can see it. Well, you know what? I'm not gonna compromise on that. I'm just gonna keep it as it is. I'm just gonna. So it's easy to see, I guess. Green and let's say black, and this would be 3 and 4. So I have now 4 lines. 1, 2. Oh, I need to actually change the content of it. 3 and 4. Right. And they all have the color yellow. Now let's say you have the first 2. You want the font size to be different than the last 2. How do you do that? So you would add 2 more classes here. Let's say you want to add the first font size is called font 12. Just gonna here I have to write it because I don't have much space here. I'm gonna say font size equal to 12 pixel, and I'm gonna write another class called font 24, double it so you can see it, and I'm gonna say font size is 24 pixels. Okay. Now I can add in first two. I'm going to add the font class font 12. The way to add is you use first class and then you put a space between and then you write the second class. So I'm just going to say font 12 and here I'm going to say font 24 font 24. Now let's say what happens. Bingo. So first two, it's 12, but they all have the yellow color, right? Because they all have the class white. Let me just change it to white so that we don't confuse ourselves. So now all four has color white, and the first two has 12 pixel font size, and the last one is 24 pixel font size, and they all have different colors. So how to use ID? So when you want to use something unique, use ID. That applies to only that element. But when you want to apply the same style to multiple elements, you would use class. And you can use a combination of multiple classes to style it. So that was our ID selector and class selector. ID selector is a £, and the class selector is a dot. So that was a brief introduction to CSS selector. I'm saying brief because we just covered selector by tag name, attributes, and the attribute ID and class. However, how to use them with a combination and how to use them in the DOM tree, where you can say, okay, select everything under this node, or classify differently. All this stuff we have to go in much detail. So I didn't want to cover everything in this tutorial because that would be just too much. So please practice, go to jsfiddle.net, try it out, and then go to the next tutorial, which is CSS selector part 2. Thank you. Bye-bye.